Welcome to the latest episode of the Brampton Board of Trade podcast. We're at episode 13.
That's right.
Which, based on our cadence of doing this every 2 weeks, means that we've been at this for half a year now.
Yeah, absolutely nuts. That blew my mind.
Yeah, I'm glad you did the math because I hadn't. But that's really exciting to know that we've actually really made some progress and we're at like kind of a mini milestone.
Yeah.
So I'm Jaipaul.
I'm Vijay.
And thank you again for joining us, and thank you to our sponsor, the Brampton Honey Badgers, for helping put this together. Their season is over now. However, they're doing all sorts of programming through the fall, basketball camps and other ways in which they're engaging the community. So please make sure to check them out at honeybadgers.ca. And thank you again for helping support conversations like this one. But Vijay, you and I are back after, we saw each other a couple of weeks ago, but it feels like we haven't done one of these. Summer somehow makes time longer, warp in this weird way.
It goes faster at the same time.
Yeah. So it feels like it's been a while since we sat down for one of these.
Yeah.
But how are things going? We've had a couple interesting days, including some fun stuff today in downtown Brampton.
That's right. Yeah. It's been interesting, a little bit more eventful, I think, in the last couple of weeks, just in terms of the policy world and what sort of concerns us day to day. But yeah, as you alluded to. We've been hard at work on some of the sort of strategic planning, internal operational kind of thinking. And in terms of what we've been working on from an advocacy perspective, we're very much focused on our upcoming Brampton in Motion Symposium and the federal pre-budget submission coming up at the end of the month. And we had a great time at Beck this morning, celebrating Scooty and their big announcement regarding their API and Presto integration. And it was a really fun day. So
for sure. And I want to talk about all the things you listed off. I think there's some good stuff there. And I think for our listeners understanding how we use some of these times, I think for a lot of folks, their interaction with the Board of Trade is primarily through our events.
Yeah.
And that's how we bring people together, our commitment to building community, showcasing conversations and thought leadership. But the summer is a slow period for that because we know people are away. And it's difficult sometimes to get both speakers, but more importantly, we don't want to be scheduling really important conversations at times that a lot of people can't participate.
Totally.
So we use the summers for planning, prepping, and all that. And let's talk a little bit about what that looks like in terms of the things you're working on. But let's talk a little bit more first about this thing we attended this morning at the Brampton Entrepreneur Center and the Scooties, the Scooty announcement. You touched on it. Why don't you go a little bit bigger? Because I know for you, some of this stuff you were seeing it for the first time. So I'd love to hear from your perspective. What we saw and what were your impressions of what we heard? Because I think it's really important. There's a really interesting story about Brampton and what Brampton is contributing in what we saw today.
Absolutely. And so this morning we had the pleasure of going to the Brampton Entrepreneurship Center in downtown Brampton to celebrate this big announcement coming from Scooty and OVEN, the Ontario Vehicle Integration Network.
I believe so. Yeah, Innovation Network. There we go.
OVEN.
So it happens when you live in a world of acronyms. Exactly. At some point, you just forget what they mean.
The acronym is now the name. And then we were joined by a bunch of our friends and collaborators and colleagues and politicians. And essentially, what it was is that Scooty was announcing the launch of their API, their platform, which allows them ultimately to integrate Presto. So as folks may know, there's now a one fare policy with Presto, meaning that if you utilize Go Transit and say TTC, the subway, or honestly, buses, that there is a one fare kind. You don't have to double up on the fares for each of the modes of transportation. Scooty is now part of that ecosystem.
And for those who don't know, Scooty is a micromobility solution. So if you're in Brampton, you've seen scooters out and about. The yellow and black ones belong to Scooty, which was one of the first companies who brought the micromobility platforms to Brampton, initially as part of a pilot that the city of Brampton was running to understand the potential for that to be part of the solutioning. And specifically what they're offering is what they'd call first mile, last mile solutioning, recognizing that for many people who use public transit, the challenge is not just in how well the network itself is set up to facilitate what you're describing. Can I seamlessly move from Brampton Transit to Go to the TTC? But also, how do you get from your house to that bus in the first place? Or how do you get off that bus and get to your place of work or wherever it is you're going at the end? And these scooters are part of that solutioning of first mile, last mile. So just to give folks some context for what's going on there.
Yeah, and I think that's actually a really important point that I think a lot of folks don't fully not even understand, but appreciate. Right? I think sometimes, we have conversations with folks who live in the community, and I think there's sometimes this belief that, Canadian, North American culture is different than that of Amsterdam or Europe, broadly speaking, and that, we don't, our workplace isn't always 15 minutes, a 15-minute walk from our home. And, the grocery store is sometimes, a 15-minute drive and things like that. So we're a car culture. And I think what Scooty honestly beautifully demonstrates with some of their visualizations is the sort of the departing, the destination and the place of departure is usually a transit station.
That's right, a transit hub of some kind.
Exactly, yeah. And folks are utilizing micromobility as that complement, that last mile solution, so that they can use the GO train, they can use buses, they can use what have you, maybe future LRTs, what have you. I think this is, and I wrote an article several months ago in support of bike lanes, because I positioned it as, if you believe in public transit, if you support public transit, you have to be in support of bike lanes, and you have to be in support of micromobility, because we can't, the bus won't drop you off in front of your house. Right. And I think Scooty's tagline, or their sort of statement that they use is transit to your doorstep.
That's right.
Yeah.
Which they told us they trademarked.
Yeah, they trademarked. That's right. So I think that's really brilliant. But yeah, in terms of the actual day itself, I mean, I felt this tremendous pride in Scooty, because they are a Brampton story. They were incubated in the Brampton entrepreneurship ecosystem, right? It was also telling that they made this announcement in Brampton.
That's right.
As well, right? It was a point of pride for sure. And this was the first time I saw Shoaib, the founder, tell the story of Scooty and his inspiration in Washington, D.C., utilizing the scooters there to essentially cut his trip in half, and wondering, why can't we have something like this here? And the inspiration of getting the colors for Scooty, which is, as you said, yellow and black, from the school buses, which are very striking. And I don't know. And Moaz, of course, Moaz Ahmed is the chair of our PGR committee, and he cares so much about all of the things, all things Brampton, all things Peel region, and to have a moment to celebrate him as well was really nice.
There was a bunch of stuff today that really jumped out at me, and I think you've touched on a few of them. One, that they did celebrate, not just Scooty's accomplishment, but that they really made a point of sharing the success with the entire team. That is part of Scooty. Really I think they said something along 27 employees now, 40, as they grow and swell and so forth. But also the entire ecosystem around them. And I thought Shoaib was very generous in ensuring that he thanked everybody, from staff and family, but every partner, everyone who took a chance on them in building that piece, and really demonstrating not just that they're a class act and understand and humble and have that humility, but that it really takes a full ecosystem to launch something. So I think there's an amazing story in there. When we think about entrepreneurship, I think oftentimes the way the story gets told is that of the founder, the CEO, the visionary, right?
The big man theory.
The great man theory of history we apply to corporate life here, particularly in North America. And I think Shoaib telling the story the way he did today, there is a version of that story that's about Shoaib, and there's a version of the story that he told today, which was about everybody. And he told the everybody story. And I think that's a really important story to tell, to say, government steps in here, private investors stepped in here, academic partners, people who gave him inspiration, people who gave him mentorship, the resources of the city, the resources of the province, building relationships. I thought that was it was an amazing story to be told, and an important one to keep in mind. So I love that part of it. I love the story in there as well around oh my gosh, I lost my train of thought there for a second. Not just the everyone's involved in it, but really how ecosystems work together, right? And then that in order to make the success that that Scooty had, comes back to something that you and I talked about here. And Schwab hit on specifically as part of this conversation, policy first, and then you create the circumstances for your business.
That was brilliant. That was brilliant.
And I thought it was an amazing piece for him to touch on, right? That for Scooty to be successful, it wasn't simply to launch a company. They were launching a company into an environment that had never seen scooters.
Yeah.
And so for them to do that, it wasn't simply enough to say we have an innovative technology and a great business model. They spent the first couple of years of their work working with various levels of government to influence policy, to help the province identify and recognize that doing some kind of pilot to explore support for micromobility mattered. Then bringing that vision to Brampton and getting Brampton Council to say, we're going to endorse running a pilot within that framework here in our city. And then when they had the groundwork laid for their solution, then they were able to step in with all their great ideas, technology, and business approach to turn that into something that was viable. So again, I think there's like a really interesting case study in that, and comes back to things that we talk about here, right? That a business can only succeed so far if the policy circumstances around that business are not designed to help it succeed. They recognized that and actually worked on policy first. I thought it was a really interesting way to go about it. We see a lot of members who will start a business and then they hit the wall of frustration because regulatory burden or regulatory restriction prevents the growth that they want. And then they're in mid-step trying to navigate. I thought their story was interesting because they said, we're not even going to start until we know we've set up.
We're going to lobby for the environment we want.
And we're not going to wait for someone else. We're actually going to become our own lobby agency, create the circumstances and go for it. I thought that was a really cool story too.
And it's a few thoughts regarding that. I think this speaks to some of the work that we do, or at least some of our belief around a theory of change in terms of our work, or at least specifically my work, my portfolio. And that is, policy and business they go hand in hand. They support each other in many ways. And, to the entrepreneur or the business operator who is running up against a wall because of the regulatory environment isn't favorable to he or she, it is not, it's not like, this is something that I can't get involved with. The next step in that is, okay, what can I do to sort of
facilitate that change?
Facilitate the change. And that's where perhaps we can come in and help, move the needle in some sense. It's also, I think Scooty's story is a little bit counterculture to your point. A lot of the startup world kind of operates on this borderline sort of libertarian kind of conception, great man theory sort of framework. And I love the idea that, at least I look to Scooty as this example, this great success story of not just, brilliant minds, individual people who are, very competent and smart, but it's also an endorsement of the Brampton Entrepreneurship Center and Venture Lab and the City of Brampton and even Oven and the province of Ontario and all these different sort of factors and institutions that have come together to create the right environment for something like Scooty to survive. And that is sort of inherent to kind of how I approach my own politics, but also sort of Mariana Mazzucato. I've talked about, the entrepreneurial state, right? The government isn't at odds with entrepreneurialism. No. It actually supports it, right? So that's a great observation.
And then the last piece is, I think, the one that you're touching on, and that's the Brampton story of it all. Right, as you said, you love that they told the story in Brampton. I think it was telling that Shoaib himself is not from Brampton. He's from Mississauga. He started his initial beta testing of his theories in Mississauga. And the work that he did wasn't because he was based here. It wasn't just happenstance. When he started reaching out to various levels of government and they had the possibility of getting a pilot started, when there was an opportunity to start scaling up the business, he shared as part of his storytelling. Others around him said, go to Brampton.
Go to Brampton.
That council will work with you. And they will help you. And then to your point, the various incubators that we had here, from the Venture Zone to the Entrepreneurship Center to various partners in the community, all wrapped themselves around Scooty and helped facilitate that success. And I think it's just a great. We talk about the stories that get told about Brampton. And unfortunately, sometimes it's not the ones that we want to hear all the time, or the ones that get told the most often. This is a story that's a great Brampton story. They started. They had an idea. they brought that idea here because they saw the potential for that idea to take root in a place like Brampton. You had the municipal government saw the value, created the circumstances for them to be successful. They utilized the resources that are here in the community. And where is Scooty now? It's based in Brampton, employing people in Brampton, drawing talent to Brampton. Yeah. And to your point, when the time came to celebrate this milestone that they've achieved, they've now expanded beyond this community to Barrie, Burlington, Markham. Yeah. They didn't have this story, they didn't have this event in any of those other cities. Yeah. They brought that story back to Brampton. And tellingly enough, people from Markham and Burlington, attended this event. Milton attended this event because they wanted to see what Scooty was doing, celebrate Scooty's success, and are willing to come to Brampton to be part of that. Totally. And that's the story that I think we've been trying to work on here. And I know Brampton in Motion's coming up in a few weeks. We saw that last year. When we've got a great story to tell in Brampton, and when we can bring a great story or storytellers to Brampton, people will come here. People want to know what's going on in this community. There's an interest in this community, and people will travel to be part of events in this community because they see what's happening here as being special and unique. We just don't tell those stories often enough. But to me, this was just another data point that reaffirms what you and I saw for the first time with my eyes, truly, last September with your amazing Brampton in Motion event, that if we can bring great stories here and showcase the good work here, people are interested. Yeah. We just have to do a better job of telling these stories. Totally. And Scooty is a member of the Board of Trade. As you mentioned, Moaz, who's one of the co-founders, is one of our volunteers and chairs our Policy and Government Relations Committee. So they're well ensconced with us. Mm-hmm. I think we owe it to them to how do we help tell this story even more loudly? Because I think what I saw today, I've always been a believer in Scooty since getting on board with this job, but what I saw today opened my eyes to how many more people need to know about this. Yeah. I always leave my conversations with Shoaib and Moaz impressed, and my visits to their office impressed. But I realized we have not done a good enough job of telling some of the themes that we talked about today more loudly. What's potential here? How can policy and GR work really facilitate businesses being successful? And the need for partnerships and an ecosystem around you, not just one great person tapping away on a keyboard in the dark. It really is everybody. And if you can tell that story, I think we can unlock more stories like this as well, I hope. Yeah.
Completely agree with you. And I as you know, I work outside of my professional capacity. I work in arts and culture. Yeah. And over the years, I've had different sort of ways I've contributed to that. And I think many years ago, I was speaking with folks who were doing this work in Brampton, and I think for a long time we had this view of a concert that we might be putting on in, say, Garden Square as having to be including a Brampton artist, Brampton headliner, for Brampton audiences, Brampton, everything. And I think that's great, but I think what we risk when we do that is that we don't bring people from outside of the community to see how wonderful Brampton can be. And so I was really trying to communicate this idea that, have Brampton artists, have Brampton openers, have Brampton audiences. It's great, but let's see if we can make a play for that big name that may not be from Brampton. Yeah. But we're bringing this person, and maybe with them their fan base from just outside our borders. Right, so that they can engage with all of the Brampton amenities and see how wonderful the community is. So I believe that about things like Brampton in Motion and Scooty and
No, I think so too. And I think it's how we try to design our panels for our events is can we showcase a thought leader, best in class, full stop, and that and often means bringing people from outside the community, because it sometimes requires us to reach into think tanks and academic circles that exist outside our community. But then at the same time, on that stage, can we feature a Brampton business or a Brampton example?
Exactly.
The case study should be someone from Brampton, so that we can find that balance exactly as you're describing. We want to tell the stories that are here, but we also want to create the audience for those stories. Totally. And that has to come with that balance that you're describing. And as you're telling the story about the music festival, what pops in my head, and I don't know if it's like maybe a dumb example to think of, but like you think about the biggest music festivals we think of, the Coachellas, the Lollapaloozas, the whatever, maybe not Lollapalooza, that tours, but like these big events that happen in a city. Yeah. It's not just featuring
LA
artists from like South by Southwest doesn't just feature artists from Texas. Coachella doesn't feature people from LA, right? Best in class means best in class, and you use the platform you build to tell local stories as part of that and create the economic benefit that happens in those communities, because the restaurants, the service providers, the Uber drivers, the micromobility solutions and all that stuff get the spillover benefit. But if you really want to create the biggest splash, it means we have to tell the Brampton story, but create an audience for it. And that may mean telling or bringing in people from outside our community and finding that balance point as well.
Completely agree.
Yeah. That's cool. But I'm super excited by what we saw today.
Yeah, agreed.
And trying to figure out how do we curate more of these stories or cultivate more of these stories. And I think that's really like helping Shoaib tell his story and trust that inspires others or pulls other people out to say, hey, I'm working on something too. Yeah. And how do we bring more people in this ecosystem in Brampton? So I think it's something amazing to celebrate. Congratulations to Scooty. Yeah. And it was a great event. You're doing great work, and we're very excited for the future. 100%. No. So there's that. That's great. The other thing I wanted to talk a little bit about today is you wrote an interesting article for the Advocate this week. Yeah. And for those who only listen to the podcast or haven't discovered us in other media, the Board of Trade puts out a weekly newsletter called The Advocate, which goes out to all our members plus thousands of people in the community in general. And it showcases just on a weekly basis, some of the things that's happening in the community, our upcoming events, things that are happening among our partners and other organizations and charities in the community, welcoming new members, all the good stuff, as we build community here at the Board of Trade. But the headline, excuse me, of every issue of The Advocate is a blog or an article about a current event, a take on what's happening in the news. And 90% of the time written by you, every now and then written by me. Yeah. And I think these are sort of our take on what's going on. Yeah. And so if you haven't had a chance yet to get that, you can go on our website and subscribe. If you go to our website and hit the link blog, you'll get all the articles that we're referring to here, including the one Vijay mentioned earlier about bike lanes as well. Yeah. Some of the ones I've written about tariffs and so forth. But the one you wrote this week was interesting. And it's interesting to me, not just because it's topical and recent, but specifically because it highlights something that, in my mind, is an unusual stance for a Board of Trade to take. Yeah. We as organizations tend to be on the conservative side of the spectrum. Yeah. The nature of what type of regulation and policy is pro-business typically finds its home on the right side of the spectrum. But I think you did an interesting job this week of writing about an issue which is organized labor in the context of the recently settled Air Canada strike, that really drove home the point that these issues are not right versus left. They're not pro-labor versus anti-labor. They're really about deeper issues. And if we take a step back and look at the deeper issue, this isn't a conversation about labors and unions. And it doesn't matter if you're on the side of management or other. It's really about some of the fundamental forces that are driving tension and challenge for our business community and our citizens. Yeah. And so I'd love for you to talk a little bit what you said there, but specifically that walking the line, because you tackled something I think for a lot of boards of trade is a topic that they wouldn't go into, or it's a very black and white issue. Yes. Unions are problematic. Organized labor is problematic. We side on the side of management. You didn't take that take. No, I didn't. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And so just to summarize the issue for those who haven't been keeping up, on August 16th, CUPE, which is the union that represents, in this case, Air Canada flight attendants, decided to formally strike. And as a response, Air Canada began canceling flights, leaving travelers stranded, uncertain about their travel plans, including myself, for the record, because I am flying soon. I didn't know. I know you're off next week. You were going to fly somewhere? Vancouver. Yeah. I had no idea. Oh my gosh. I'm glad I got settled for you then. Yeah, Air Canada. I realized I never asked you where you were going next week. Yes. I was one of those neurotic people who immediately bought a backup refundable airline ticket. Smart. Anyway. But yeah, no. So as a response to that, Air Canada began canceling flights, and then Ottawa stepped in, the federal government, the Minister of Jobs and Families. Yeah. Interesting. It's an interesting conflation, right? Yeah. Jobs and Families. Also, just for the record, under the Carney government, the Minister of Labor was changed to Minister of Jobs and Families, which I think
is a signal of something, but I don't know exactly what.
Okay, so we will monitor this.
Yeah, exactly. So
Future podcast on that
one. Paddy Haidu. So they decided to invoke Section 107, which mandated the flight attendants to go back to work and to participate in sort of mandatory arbitration. And the QP defied this and said, no, we're not going back to work.
Under threats of fine and even jail time?
Jail time as well, yeah, absolutely. So this was quite, it was quite a bold move from the union. And then I believe it was August 18th that both parties, the union and Air Canada, reached a tentative deal, just backing up, one of the motivations for the strike was that there are many sort of elements, but one of them was that it didn't include ground pay.
Yes, that's right.
Which means that when the flight is grounded and all of the things that flight attendants do while the plane is not in the air, flight attendants do not get paid for that.
Right. And in my understanding, so I didn't know this. That was something I learned, I think, as I imagine many did in the last week. Yeah. A certain amount of prep and getting ready, I think one can understand maybe just sort of part of the package.
Yeah.
But the implication of this is if there's any delay, if the flight gets grounded for weather, anything of that nature, that adds to it. So it's not just like, it's just a simple 10 minutes while we're taxiing back before we take off. This is the entire operation on the ground, including any delays. So that could be hours and hours that the staff is expected to work at the same standard as it would at any other time, however, without getting compensation. So
absolutely.
It has the potential to be a really significant amount.
Well, yeah, and and
there was some historical gaps in pay increase as well, if I understand.
Yes,
right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. That's right. And actually, I think if you were to calculate it, the average flight attendant, Air Canada flight attendant, makes less than minimum wage.
Right. If you take the overall hours as the denominator, right?
Yeah, that's right. So actually, a friend of mine interestingly said something that I hadn't considered, but he said he is very happy about this because now Air Canada is incentivized to not have their flights delayed or grounded.
Oh, so I like that. Okay, unintended consequence. I like that a lot.
Okay, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of that. But yeah, so where was I? Ground pay. So in this tentative deal, it includes pay increases, but most importantly, it includes up to an hour, 60 minutes of ground pay at 50% of what the flight attendant is earning with, I believe, I think 5% increase every year.
That's right. Yeah. That's right.
So anyway, so big win for the union, full stop, big win. What I wrote about was, again, to your point, going to the Ontario Chamber AGM, Canadian Chamber AGM, just engaging in the chamber world, Board of Trade world in general. We often, institutions like ours often represent the employer, the interests of the employer. And when it comes to matters related to organized labor, to put it lightly, I think there is some skepticism about that and some opposition, let's say. And so that's not to say some chambers aren't pro-union. Depending on the community, especially if there's a very important industry and that industry happens to have a union or some sort of organized element.
And when I made the statement, I didn't mean it as an absolute, but as a generalization.
No, totally. And as opprobrious as Pierre Poilievre was at the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade event, when he talked about boards of trade and chambers of commerce as corporate lobbyists, I think the characterization isn't inaccurate. Right. So I agree with you. So I took this stance in the article that pretty much acknowledged, whether you're on the right or the left, whether you're pro-union, anti-union, what you have to confront is the idea that there is a wage crisis in this country. And that's what this union was identifying. And there, we saw maybe a bit of an exception during the pandemic. But for the most part, wages have not kept up with inflation in other goods and services. We've talked at length during our Brampton in Motion and Moving the Needle events that growth in house prices has completely dwarfed growth in income levels over the last 30 years, especially. So my take was there are a number of factors that are leading to depressed wages, right? housing being one of them, but also this sort of addiction to cheap labor as well. And we've talked a lot about this with respect to temporary foreign workers, reliance on international students. And it's important not to blame immigrants for low wages, but we should be looking at policymakers and employers who rely and pursue these programs specifically so they don't have to pay higher wages to workers.
Yeah.
So what I was trying to characterize is there is a wage crisis, and this should be top of mind for not just policymakers, but the business community as a whole. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. And I think you did a great job of framing that. And I think you cited statistics and data points that came from think tanks on both sides of the spectrum as well. To say
CCPA, Fraser,
everyone everyone agrees this is an issue. And so I wanted you to take a minute to explain the article and share with people that it's there, because I think it's worth reading. Not that they're not all worth reading. This is worth drawing people's attention to, because to your point, it touches on something deeper that's going on right now. And I think you basically articulated this at the end of the article, and I think it really is the takeaway, that this could be the canary in the coal mine, proverbially. And that is, what we saw this week with Air Canada is going to be an issue for organized. It's going to be an issue. It is already an issue. Having more labor disruptions is what we may have as a result of it.
Absolutely.
As the cost of living is so far outstripping the increase in wages across the spectrum. And we talk about it in the context of the discussions I've had with businesses around tariffs and the impact that that's having, because that's increasingly driving up the cost of raw materials and labor, and ultimately, therefore, raw materials and supply chain, and therefore has the potential to have it in goods. We're already seeing increases in places like grocery that we anticipate more coming. Like the initial impact of tariffs has been somewhat buffered because so many businesses got ahead of things and they either stockpiled or out of deference to their consumers and in the hope that the tariff disruption was going to be a short one, absorbed some of the impacts of increased costs. But we're getting to the point now where for those who got ahead and maybe stockpiled raw material, they're starting to run through those supplies. And for those stores, and for those who are trying to hold the line as it pertains to price increases, they're running out of runway to do so. And we're going to start seeing consumer pricing go up.
That's right.
And we've already talked historically about the under support for social services in our community at a time that their need is going to continue to increase as people find themselves in more precarious positions as it pertains to food insecurity and housing insecurity. So to me, this article you wrote this week was a really important one, not just because of this specific issue, but recognizing that this is a broader issue that I think we're going to hear a lot more about, see a lot more about in the coming months, read a lot more about in the coming months, and that we have to look at it as a nonpartisan issue.
Totally.
We have to look at solutioning that is bringing together all the players, government, industry, those in social service sector, labor, to the table to understand how we can solution in ways that are going to resolve these issues. Because it's not as simple as saying, oh, then we just need to increase wages to adjust. That's not a mechanism that's available to most employers. No. But at the same time, it's not as simple to say, well, how can we manipulate things like interest rates and others to bring down the cost of housing? I think you cited in your article, and I know you could probably quote me better, but as experts like Mike Moffat, where they've done the modeling to how long it would take to right size housing with wages again. We're talking like decades, basically, at the current trajectories
about 20
that we're
years,
on.
18 years.
So it really is deeper policy issues around how we create more affordable housing stock, how we create jobs, new jobs that are more in line with the expectations and needs of wage earners. And to your point, around newcomers and those who are here on foreign visa programs, how are we better aligning those programs to ensure that those who are being hired through that are A, not being exploited in order to artificially suppress wages, and B, how these mechanisms are not overall, being utilized to drive the overall labor market down we have to right size these compensation models.
Totally.
So not only they're not being abused, but also ensuring that those wages are competitive for those who are not in those programs as well. Because ultimately they're creating a false lowering of the market that's only exacerbating the situation and incentivizing employers to not pay fair wages. So it's this wholesale change that's coming that I think you did a great job of saying this is just but one example of.
Yeah. No, I agree, and especially as the world becomes increasingly regionalized and the U.S. becomes more protectionist, and there is this sentiment change with respect to globalization and the rules-based trading system and all of that. We are looking to embrace more domestic producers, suppliers, manufacturers. Our goods are going to get more expensive, right? And I think there is this economic argument to say, well, if we focus on bringing down the cost of doing business in other areas, but also, ensuring that Canadian labor is protected and there are that we do ensure that we try to create a policy environment to have Canadians earning more so that they can live in downtown Toronto if they wish to, or they can aspire towards home ownership. This is all important for the economy because more money means more expenditure, more spending. And one of the basic economic principles when I took my first economics course at Waterloo is, if you invest in jobs and in industry, you could collect a lot more tax revenue and not raise a single tax.
That's right.
Right. Yeah. So that argument, I think, can probably be made better. But there's also this other piece that you touched on, which is Gregor Robertson, our housing minister, has said that, to address the housing affordability crisis, we don't need to bring the average value of a home down. And, Mike, as you alluded to, Mike Moffat did this modeling and said, if that is the case, well, we'll have to, pretty aggressively invest in higher wages for Canadians. Yeah. And that'll take 20 years at current levels.
And if I recall, wasn't it something like we'd have to get back to a not the wages, but the ratio that we saw in
2005.
2005. Okay, yes. I thought it was actually earlier than that. My memory was like in the 1990s.
Yeah, no.
We'd have to go back to that type of balance.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, 2005, and
I mean, which resonates because of the age that I'm at.
Yeah.
That was when my wife and I when Angel and I bought our first house. Was in that time frame.
Yes.
We got married in the early 2000s. We got married in 2001. We bought our first house in 2001.
Yeah.
And that was because we were and neither one of us had glamorous jobs or high-paying jobs. We just had jobs. We recently graduated from university. We're just getting our lives started. Yeah. Home ownership. I just had to underline the point. Home ownership was achievable. Yeah. I was working a retail job at that time and could buy a house.
There you go.
Right, and that tells you how much has changed since that time. Right, Angel was working an entry-level marketing job, and I was working a retail job, and on that we were able to buy a home.
Yeah, and
that is not something you can do 25 years later at all.
No, not at all. Not at all. Yeah, and now there's this great article as well about my generation and those who are younger than me. The contingent of us who can aspire towards home ownership have parents who own homes and are utilizing their equity so that we can finance the purchase of our new home, of our first home, and that should be frightening to everybody because that creates this class divide of the haves and have-nots. And so there's this Canadian flavor in a similar way that we see, Middle America kind of bemoaning the loss of manufacturing jobs. I think the Canadian flavor of that, or the sort of maple flavored version of that is,
of the Rust Belt,
is this idea around home ownership and specifically around wages, right? And what we feel we sort of rightfully deserve, or what was promised to us in some way. So it's a complicated problem, but that's what I was thinking about.
Yeah, no, and again, I just want to draw people's attention to it because I think it's something it's definitely worth considering. Yeah. I think a lot of the work we're going to be doing in the coming months is going to be around these types of issues. I think we've talked a lot about things like tariffs, for instance, in the past few months, and we'll continue to be active on that front, and looking at ways to help businesses here diversify, their access to other markets, diversify their customer bases, innovate, and so forth. And we're going to be talking a lot about things like disruptive technologies and so forth, and how they can contribute and can be challenges and opportunities as well. So there's a lot of the current, but one of the things that's been abundantly clear to me is a lot of this stuff has become distraction from the stuff that still are fundamental issues, like the one you're touching on right now. At the end of the day, wages are not in line with the standard of living that most Canadians want. And so if we want to be effective in helping address that problem, it's not just talking about tariffs. It's not just talking about what's new and disruptive. It's really getting back to a lot of the basic stuff that we were working on before the world kind of went sideways 6 months ago. And that is, how are we helping businesses become more efficient? Red tape reduction. How are tax dollars being utilized, collected and utilized? What types of programs do we have in place to facilitate skilled labor, people becoming skilled and then finding work?
For sure.
And these issues that the cost of utilities, these issues that are just basic business issues, because we're not going to move that needle in any other way. I think if we want to be effective on this, it's going to be a lot of programming and conversation from us that are really around how do we help businesses grow and find financial stability, and what are we advocating for that helps them do that, and what tools are available to help them do that. Because to your point, there isn't a magic button that can be pushed that says, okay, suddenly houses are affordable, or suddenly everyone's getting paid a fair wage.
No, it's a multi-pronged situation. What I didn't go into in the article is how do you actually raise wages? And it's touching on what you're saying, which is there's a real need for cost relief for things like utilities and utilities, property taxes. Like we talk about development charges all the time. There are real costs that add up. But the other piece is we have to invest in good jobs as well. And the federal government, I think, has signaled that they want to prioritize this. And we saw inklings of this with the Trudeau government, but we need to be thinking of jobs of tomorrow. And high value, productive jobs that actually increase our productivity as a nation, that also offer higher wages. Right. And then there's this other piece around, and this is not a typical sort of advocacy position for a board of trade, but there are just some straight up protections. There's straight up like raise the minimum wage, right? To live in Toronto, to get just a 1-bedroom in Toronto, you need to be making $33 an hour. That is higher than the minimum wage at $17 and higher than the median wage that someone earns in Toronto itself. So there's a mismatch there.
Absolutely. So I think we've got, so again, I really encourage people to read the article, but think about the implications of what's being talked about here. These are much deeper issues. This felt like a story that was characterized around disruptions to travel, and how many people who were worried about how they couldn't get back from vacation, or the way that you're describing, and that's fair. I'm not knocking that part of it. I just wish more of the other part of this was being told. Why was this happening in the first place? And I think some news outlets did a good job of covering aspects of that, including specifically, the issue around gender, that many of these individuals who are flight attendants historically, or not historically, are female, and how this also casts a spotlight on the historical underpayment or lesser wages that are delivered to female employees, and how they have less leverage in the workplace often to fight for those increases in wages. So I think there were some elements where it went beyond just the travel story. But I think the real story here that we need to talk about is this one about what's broken here. And this is just, I think, again, this is the first of, I think, of many examples we'll be talking about in the months to come. And I think it's something that we really need to be thinking about strategically. How are we getting back to these sort of fundamental issues that are around business competitiveness and facilitating, to your point, ultimately advocating for things that are going to result in better wages as well. So with that, maybe the last thing to talk about today, since we've already sort of got the segue to engaging with government. I know one of the things that you and Hannah have been working on over the past couple of weeks is a pre-budget submission to the federal government. The Carney government, because of the time of the election, deferred the issuing of a full budget in the spring, which we traditionally would have gotten a federal budget because of their recent election at that time, but have committed to, I think the term they're using is an economic statement that they're going to be putting out this fall. You'll correct me, but basically an indication of where the government's going to be making its spends. And they've already given us some signs. The Prime Minister already indicated that it's going to be one of austerity. That Canadians should be preparing themselves for. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what you've been hearing and what types of recommendations that you and the team have been putting together on behalf of our business community that we're going to be forwarding as our MPs locally start considering how they're going to comment on the budget. Or the economic statement, or whatever it's being called. What's it being called?
So the thing is that what I understand is that they deferred the creation of a formal budget in the spring, as you said, and they announced that they were doing a fall economic statement.
Okay.
However, they got some pushback on that.
Okay.
And now they're calling it's a budget. They're tabling a budget.
My apologies. I missed that story. So shame on me. I missed that update. I missed that twist of the plot. Okay, got it.
So
this is all that happened. Polyev gets reelected. Suddenly everything has to change again. I guess
we should talk about that briefly too. But
I'd love to talk about that.
No, it's interesting because submitting pre-budget submissions is something that we do at the Board of Trade. We do that provincially. We want to make sure we do that federally as well, and a lot of our counterparts are doing the same thing. For those who've been following along, nothing super new or super novel. It's related to our priorities that we've identified through our stakeholder engagement, specifically the Business Confidence Index. We're going to be offering recommendations in three main areas. The first is public transit. The second is housing. The third is around immigration. And so in terms of the actual recommendations that Hannah and I have been working on, when it comes to public transit, the big piece for us is, in many ways, last year our preoccupation was pestering the federal government. Pestering. Well,
technically, we're not a lobbying organization.
Not a lobbying organization.
So maybe we are a pestering organization.
Maybe we are, yes. The federal government to participate in cost sharing with the provincial government for the Huron-Ontario LRT.
That's right.
The tunneled portion. We got that announcement, and it was great. It was a few days before the announcement of a general election. And what we're looking for now is specific dollar amounts, right? And some clarity on a specific funding commitment, whether that's a percentage or what have you, but some clarity so that this project can actually begin.
Sure, yeah.
And the other piece is, and Hannah identified this, is the conditionality that is attached to this. There is conditionality around housing targets and all of that, but it's quite vague. And understanding exactly what our commitments as a city are is, I think, important to expediting this project. So that's the first piece. The second piece is around housing, and to the extent that it's a tough conversation because really the bulk of our recommendations are for the provincial government, but to the extent that the federal government can really step in, it's really around some issues that we identified in moving the needle, which is that in 1993 their cooperative housing program ended. And there was this historic sort of revival of their cooperative housing program in 2024. I believe it was 1.3 billion or 1.5 billion rather in cooperative housing. We want to see a continuation of that funding and that program.
Right.
And we want to see continuous institutionalized cooperative housing policy at the federal level. So that's the first piece there. And then the second piece is really in conjunction with some of our partners, specifically Better Way Alliance and Tapestry Capital. They're part of this coalition around community-owned real estate, and we're looking to and we talked about this a little bit, but community land trust, community-owned real estate is something that is very exciting to a community like Brampton. I think to at least to our team, and we really want to see any sort of community-oriented investment vehicle, like a community bond, that can ultimately be used for the purpose of buying property for community ownership. Yeah. We want to see that not taxed like income, because we believe that if you're investing in your community, you should be penalized for it. If you're investing in the stock market, you're taxed at a different
a different rate.
A different rate. So we want to see the inclusion of community investment vehicles in RRSPs or TFSAs, make them eligible for those tax protections. And we want to see potentially tax credits that can be used for community-owned real estate as well. So those are 2 big sort of federally focused housing recommendations. And then the last piece is something that we're still working on. We received a report from the Commissioner of Employers just a few days ago, and that was really around how to reform our immigration policy with respect to foreign workers and international students. And this is a sensitive sort of issue, and we want to make sure that we're crafting the right language around this. But we've been, talking ad nauseum about the need for foreign credential recognition and to modernize, and it's very sector specific, but modernize our ability to be able to hire skilled immigrant talent, skilled foreign talent in areas that have real labor shortages.
That's right.
Not the low wage, low skill sort of LMIA abused sectors. Yeah. But in we need doctors, we need construction workers, we need
all manners of technicians and researchers and
So how can we reform our programs to be able to take advantage of this in a real way that's beneficial for everyone? So those are 3 big areas, and we're looking forward to sharing the finalized version with the public.
That's amazing. And so just for those who are listening and want to keep an eye out, sort of what are next steps? What are things going out? Yeah. I think we'd almost create a segment like Jaipaul's dumb question of the podcast. No. When is the budget committed to coming out? Just so people understand timelines and when we'll have stuff ready to be shared and comment if folks have comment.
So the pre-budget submissions are due August 28th. Mm-hmm. So by next week, we'll have a finalized version that we'll be submitting. At that point, it'll be shared, maybe through our advocate or the advocate or something like that. And then the legislature, the House of Commons, it resumes mid-September. Yep. And I don't believe that there's a specific date yet, but in mid-October. Late October, we can expect some form of a budget being tabled.
Awesome. Yeah. So lots happening on that front in the coming weeks and months. And just to sort of share, just for people who are listening as well, these are not just recommendations that we're pulling together internally. These are reflections of conversations we have with members, but also external stakeholders with whom we have relationships and who we've come to rely upon for good data. To help us shape these into recommendations that reflect the priorities that our members have told us. I think it's also worth noting that those priority areas that you've described are not simply ones that you pulled out. So not only are the recommendations done in consultation, but the areas that you've selected also came about from the priorities that our members have identified through the Business Confidence Index that we do in the fall to say these are the issues that are most top of mind for our members. And I always think it's interesting because one of the things I think when you describe that, these are not what people consider to be necessarily traditional business issues. No. Perhaps the last one, but transportation and affordability of housing, one might argue, are not business issues. Yeah. But the reason we fight and are so loud on these issues and put so much energy into these issues is because when we go to our members and say, what's top of mind to you? Of course, they mention things like taxation and red tape and regulatory oversight and all that sort of stuff. But those are down the list. The top issues every time, and this is not just in the last year, this is historically at the Board of Trade, have been transportation, congestion, moving around the city, goods and people, and the need for investment in that infrastructure, and the need to address affordability in our community, primarily through making housing more affordable. Yeah. So I just want to share that for folks as well, that if you're wondering why these issues, it's because you've told us that these are the issues that matter most. And I think it's always interesting that as a, framed as a business organization, people ask, why do we put so much time into community? And, it's because these issues of day-to-day living and livability and vibrancy in our community are the ones that our members tell us matter most. Not just that we believe, which we do, in that need for a balanced community, to have a vibrant business community, but our members believe it too.
Yeah,
so I think it's great that you have
absolutely.
these recommendations coming together, because I think it really reflects
Yeah.
that which the membership is looking for.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to see where they go next as well. And Canadian Chamber of Commerce is coming up in October.
Yeah.
Different recommendations, but we can talk more about what we're advocating for on the federal level at a different conversation, because you put some recommendations and policy resolutions I think are they're working their way through the system to see if we get them onto the policy docket.
Absolutely.
But we're trying to get some policy conversations going among our colleagues at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce as well later this fall.
That's right. Looking forward to
lots of updates there also.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's the time we've had for today. I realized one thing I didn't say, which I think we should, is just because we started off with sort of a current event thing. Last night was the mayor's annual hockey night in Brampton fundraiser for the Osler Network, and they announced they raised $6.6 million last night that would go toward the building of the second hospital here in Brampton, which is an amazing accomplishment.
That's great.
That means over the last 2 years they've raised over $20 million, and they got a pledge from a family of $50 million over a period of time as well. So significant investments in the infrastructure of healthcare here in Brampton. So congratulations to everyone who helped put that event together, brought in a bunch of talent, both retired and active in the NHL, and put on a great night of entertainment for folks, but most importantly raised a bunch of money for the community. And we talked about telling good stories here in Brampton. That's one of those stories we need to be telling as well.
Very
and
good
so
story, yeah.
Congratulations to the mayor and his team for doing that.
Yes, well done.
All right.
Yeah.
And so with that, we'll be back again shortly.
Yep.
Enjoy your time in
Thank
Vancouver.
you.
Now that I know you can fly there and fly back.
Yes.
And I'll look forward to the next one of these conversations.
Thank you. All right.
Thanks again to the Honey Badgers, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Take care.
All right.